Before anything else, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single real-life episode like this one. Smash the like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Now take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a jolt of reality. Have you ever wondered what happens when emotional emptiness meets the perfect opportunity right inside your own home? Because I hadn't. Not until the day my husband walked out, and his best friend stayed behind. A kind man, strong, black, and nothing like what I was used to. I hired him as a nanny. I trusted him with my kids, and in one moment of exhaustion, desire, and vulnerability, I trusted him with my body. Yes, he stepped into the shower with me. And what happened next, you won't believe. This isn't just a real story of infidelity. It's a raw snapshot of what many women go through in silence. A private, honest confession where the line between right and wrong blurred so much, only the heart could tell the difference. You're about to discover how a simple look can spiral into a confession of cheating, and how even an ordinary woman can become the center of a forbidden confession that changes everything. But do I regret it? Well, you'll have to stay with me till the end to find out. When I first hired Andrew, I wasn't thinking about infidelity, betrayal, or any kind of emotional confusion. I was just a tired, overwhelmed mom trying to keep my sanity intact while juggling 2 kids, a part-time job, and a husband who was never home. Greg traveled so much that the house started feeling emptier than my wedding vows. So, when Andrew showed up, tall, calm, with this quiet strength, I didn't see a man. I saw relief. Someone to help. Just that. At first, I felt weird having another man in the house, especially someone so attentive. You hear so many infidelity stories online, especially those infidelity story Reddit threads that spiral into chaos. But this felt different. He wasn't just helping the kids. He was steady, present, and honestly more emotionally available than Greg had been in years. I told myself it was just gratitude, nothing else. But even then, a seed was being planted, slowly and silently. I remember watching him play with the kids, making them laugh while I stood in the doorway, exhausted but oddly comforted. It's strange how something so innocent can become the soil for emotional cheating, isn't it? Looking back now, that's how most cheating stories begin. Not with passion, but with presence, with consistency, with someone simply noticing you exist. And Andrew noticed. Still, I didn't dare admit to myself that something was changing. That familiar line between appreciation and attraction was becoming blurry, and my instincts whispered warnings I didn't want to hear. I told myself this wasn't a cheating story. This wasn't one of those forbidden confessions. But deep down, I could already feel the crack beginning to form. And it only got louder the more time we spent together. It started with small things, tiny moments that felt harmless at first. We'd laugh while folding laundry or joke about the chaos of getting 2 toddlers to eat broccoli. Nothing romantic. Nothing that screamed infidelity. But somehow those little exchanges began to feel intimate. And in the silence left by Greg's absence, Andrew's voice became the one I heard most. It wasn't just noise, it was comfort. You see, most infidelity stories don't begin in the bedroom. They begin in the kitchen, over shared tasks and quiet laughs. Emotional cheating sneaks in through the back door, disguised as understanding. Andrew had this way of listening, really listening, that made me feel seen in ways Greg hadn't in years. It wasn't just about the kids anymore. It became about me, about us. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, I caught myself wanting to ask Andrew how his day was, not out of politeness, but because I genuinely cared. That scared me, because that's when I realized I wasn't just looking for help with the kids. I was looking for connection. And somehow, in the middle of this chaotic home, I'd found it with someone who wasn't my husband. A subtle line had been crossed. I started to feel guilty, but also strangely alive. There was a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Was it wrong? Maybe. But it felt real. And once you've tasted real, it's hard to go back to the hollow. That's how these stories of infidelity moments grow, slowly, steadily, until you can't unfeel them. And yet, the shift didn't stop there. I started noticing things I wish I hadn't. The way Andrew's hand would brush mine when we passed a toy. How his eyes lingered on mine a second too long when we laughed. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just tired, emotional, vulnerable. But the butterflies didn't lie. And that nervous thrill in my chest. God, I hadn't felt that since before marriage. That's how the earliest signs of cheating in marriage often hide. Not in actions, but in the unspoken. We never said anything out loud, but our bodies were having a quiet conversation. A glance, a lean, a pause before walking away. It was subtle, like reading between the lines of a forbidden letter. I'd walk into a room and instantly feel the air shift. He never crossed a line, and neither did I, but we danced on the edge of it. And that edge? It's sharp. The kind that carves deep before you even know you're bleeding. There was one moment I'll never forget. I was washing dishes, and he came behind me to grab something. His hand barely grazed my waist. A simple touch. But I froze, like the world held its breath. I looked up at the window, saw our reflection, and thought, this is what an emotional confession of infidelity feels like: silent, invisible, and dangerously addictive. From the outside, we looked like two adults caring for kids. But inside, there was this quiet fire building, slow and steady. I kept thinking about all the infidelity stories I had judged in the past, all those "how could she?" reactions I used to have. And now, here I was, wondering what would happen if I didn't walk away the next time he looked at me like that. There was this one afternoon at the park, quiet, unusually calm. The kids were running through the grass, their laughter fading into the breeze. Andrew sat beside me on the bench, closer than usual but not too close. We talked about life, about exhaustion, about how hard it is to feel like you're enough. And for the first time, I saw the weight he carried too. That moment, it almost felt like a mirror. And mirrors don't lie. He looked at me with eyes that had no intention of hiding. No words of cheating were spoken, but everything between us said it all. There was something magnetic in that silence. A sense that if one of us moved just a little closer, everything would change. It was that kind of stillness that demands a choice, and yet neither of us made one. Not yet. Because the truth is, emotional infidelity and cheating don't need lips. They need vulnerability. He told me he noticed I'd been distant lately, that I looked sad when no one else was watching. My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him everything, about how invisible I'd felt, about the lonely dinners, the anniversaries Greg forgot, the quiet resentment building in my chest. But all I said was, "Yeah, it's been hard." And he nodded like he already knew. That connection? It was deeper than any physical cheating story could capture. Looking back now, that moment was our almost confession. The place where emotional truths stood on the tip of our tongues but never dared to fall. I walked away that day feeling seen and scared in equal measure. Because once you've felt that kind of understanding, it's hard to go back to pretending. And the hardest part? Things didn't cool down after that. If anything, they started to heat up. It was late. The kids had finally fallen asleep, and the house had that rare silence that feels almost sacred. I stepped out onto the porch for some air, a glass of wine in hand, needing space for my thoughts. Andrew followed moments later, quiet, respectful. He didn't say anything, he just sat beside me. And in that stillness, something unspoken began to rise between us. Not loud or obvious, but undeniable. It felt like the beginning of a cheating story, and I didn't know how to stop it. The moonlight softened his face, and in that low glow, he looked different, gentler, vulnerable. He turned toward me, slowly, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. That simple gesture, so innocent on the surface, made my heart race like I was 17 again. I froze. My breath caught. It was the kind of moment that every story of infidelity seems to orbit around, quiet, charged, and irreversible. For one long second, he leaned in like he might kiss me, or maybe he was just caught in the same emotional riptide I was drowning in. My body ached with the pull of that forbidden closeness. And then a branch snapped. Somewhere in the yard. We jumped apart like teenagers caught in the act, though nothing had actually happened. Nothing and yet everything. That near touch left fingerprints on my soul. I went to bed that night trembling. Not from what we did, but from what we didn't do. That was the moment I realized how dangerously close I had come to becoming the main character in one of those real story of infidelity tales that I used to devour with disbelief. It didn't matter that we hadn't crossed the line. Emotionally, I was already standing on the other side. And that tension didn't disappear the next day. It followed us like a shadow. The next morning, everything felt different. Even though nothing had technically happened. I avoided Andrew's eyes as he helped the kids with breakfast, my hands trembling, just pouring juice. The silence between us wasn't cold. It was loaded. I kept thinking, did he feel it too? Or was I the only one drowning in the weight of an almost? These are the questions that fuel so many infidelity stories. The invisible aftermath that never leaves. I tried to act normal, to switch back into mother mode, to hide the internal chaos that pulsed with every glance. But the truth is, after a moment like that, you don't just go back. Something changes. Every time we crossed paths, I felt it, this electricity, this silent acknowledgement of what almost was. And ironically, the fact that we hadn't done anything made it worse, because it left the door open to possibility. And forbidden confessions often start in that space between restraint and desire. Greg came home that evening, tired, distracted as usual, tossing his suitcase on the floor and asking what was for dinner. I looked at him and felt a strange mix of guilt and emptiness. Guilt because I knew my heart had strayed. Emptiness because he didn't notice, didn't ask, didn't see me. That's how so many cheating stories begin. Not with a kiss, but with neglect. A woman who feels like a ghost in her own marriage. Andrew and I didn't speak about that night. We didn't need to. Our eyes said everything our mouths couldn't. We slipped back into professionalism, polite smiles, careful distance. But that emotional residue? It clung to me like perfume after a long hug. That's the thing about almost cheating. It lingers. And no matter how much you try to shake it off, it follows you into the quiet moments that come next. I spent the following days battling myself in silence. I'd look in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back. Was I truly that close to an act of infidelity? I used to think things were black and white, you're loyal or you're not. But now I understood. Most infidelity stories aren't about lust. They're about loneliness, about a void that slowly eats away at your values until a single moment feels inevitable. What haunted me wasn't what happened. It was how badly I wanted it to. That's what no one talks about in those viral infidelity story Reddit threads. The craving for connection. The silent longing for someone to just look at you and see you. I kept replaying the porch scene in my head, feeling the ghost of his touch, the almost of it all. And every time I did, my heart would race and then break all over again. I told myself I had to draw a line. For my kids, for Greg, for myself. But drawing boundaries after you've already crossed them emotionally feels like locking a door after someone's already stepped inside. I distanced myself from Andrew, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. I made the decision to protect a marriage that, in truth, had been abandoned by both of us long before that night. And yet, the memory still lingers. Not as regret, but as a reminder. A reminder of how easily cheating in marriage can creep into the spaces where no one is looking. A reminder of how dangerous emotional closeness can become when left unchecked. I resumed life. School runs, grocery lists, smiles. But deep inside, the echo of that almost love, that almost kiss, still hums beneath the surface. Waiting, wondering. You know what still haunts me? Not the moment in the shower. Not the look in his eyes. What haunts me is how easy it was to get there, how subtle the steps were. That's the truth about infidelity and cheating. It's never one big decision. It's 100 little ones you don't even notice until the story is already written. And now I ask you, how many silent betrayals are you living with? How many emotional gaps are you pretending don't matter? This wasn't just a cheating story. This was a wake-up call, a brutal mirror showing me how quickly a routine life can spiral into something unrecognizable. So ask yourself, are you truly present in your relationship? Or are you just coexisting, silently starving for something deeper? Because when the right person enters at the wrong time, the boundaries blur. And if you don't face what's broken, someone else might step in to offer the connection you've been missing. I'm not here to justify what happened. I'm here to expose the cracks so you can repair yours before it's too late. Maybe this was my fall, or maybe it was my rebirth. Either way, I hope you walk away from this story with your eyes a little wider and your heart a little more honest. Don't just survive your relationship, feel it, fight for it, or free yourself from the illusion of it. Speech balloons, so now I want to hear from you. Have you ever come dangerously close to crossing a line? What would you have done in my place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit you somewhere deep, don't forget to subscribe, activate the notifications, and stay with me. Because we're just getting started, and trust me, there's more truth coming your way.